Hello everybody, and welcome to the Teaching Communication Skills course. The content of this slides was compiled by myself, Dr. Leslie Neely, and Dr. Catherine Hoffman. We want to note that this work was supported in whole or part by a grant from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, the THECB. The opinions and conclusions expressed in this document are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the opinions or policies of the THECB. So we are going to talk about how to teach communication skills to individuals with autism using ABA. Let's start off by discussing ABA, also known as Applied Behavior Analysis. ABA is technically defined as the science of systematically applying interventions based on the principles of behavior to improve socially significant behaviors. As behavior analysts, we focus on modifying the environment to help individuals be successful. We also rely on evidence-based interventions and take data on the progression of those behaviors so that we know the interventions are working. One of the best things about using ABA to teach communication skills is that through ABA we focus all of our attention and efforts on the behaviors we want to see and minimize our attention and efforts to the interfering behaviors. This is called a reinforcement-based approach. We reinforce or encourage the appropriate behaviors, and we minimize attention and efforts to the rest. To get started in ABA, we must first identify the behavior. All of you have indicated you are interested in working on communication skills with your child. Before we begin talking about a communication skills intervention, we need to identify and define the behaviors you want to work on. These communication behaviors should relate to anything that requires communication or any type of interaction with another person. Here are two examples of target communication behaviors. The first can target requesting favorite items. So if your child likes Mickey Mouse, for example, you might choose a verbal expression such as Mick, Mickey, or can I have Mickey please? If your child is nonverbal, you might consider something called the picture exchange system, where your child can exchange a picture in exchange for the preferred item, or an assistive device that can allow your child to communicate. You can also choose a combination of pictures plus vocal approximations. So pause here for a moment and take a minute to write down 3 goals or desired communication behaviors you might have to work on with your child. When you meet with your BCBAD, they can help you prioritize these goals and choose the most crucial goal to begin working on. So what should you expect from your meetings? During your first meeting, your BCBA will want to identify one of the behaviors and define it so that it is observable or able to be seen and measurable. Here are 2 examples of defining behaviors in observable and measurable terms. For example, instead of saying paying attention, you might define the behavior as sitting with eyes oriented towards the teacher. This allows the behavior analyst to count the exact behavior. Similarly, having a tantrum might be defined as flopping on the floor and crying. Your BCBA will also want to define the behavior so that they can take data and make sure the intervention is working. Data can also be helpful in identifying when to make changes to an intervention. Data is incredibly important. A lot of research has shown that that when decisions are made based on impressions of progress rather than data, people tend to overestimate the ability of the learner. However, when data is used to guide instruction, students and children make greater gains. So how might you prepare for your meeting? After identifying the behavior, go ahead and observe your child in the natural situation where the target skill should occur. For example, you might watch your child at dinner and see what behaviors they use to request food. Make sure to record your child's response, so what they did, what they said. You can also take a video. These notes will help you and your BCBAD create an intervention that targets your child's current communication skills and promotes progression of those communication skills. We will now discuss some basic information you will need to know for the first meeting. These next slides are for informational purposes only, but please feel free to jot down notes or questions to ask your BCBAD. To begin, I'd like to discuss the ABCs of ABA. The ABCs refer to terms we use to describe one's behavioral interaction. The first part, the antecedent, or what happens before the behavior, is the A term. The second part, the behavior, or what the learner does, is the B term. And the third part, the consequence, or what happens after behavior, is the C term. We behavior analysts find that what happens right before and right after a behavior can change whether the behavior happens at all. The ABCs also guide us when we look to intervene on certain behaviors. In particular, the consequence can either encourage the behavior to happen in the future or reinforce the behavior, or it can discourage the behavior from happening again, or punish the behavior. Please note that we do not talk about reinforcing or punishing a child, but rather a behavior itself. Also, consequences don't always mean something bad. For example, if a child sees his mom for the first time in a week, what we would term the antecedent, he might hug his mama and tell her that he missed her, the behavior. She might return the hug and give him a kiss, the consequence. If he hugs his mom more in the future, we would say that the child's hugging behavior has been reinforced by the mom's hugs and kisses. Our goal is to set up positive behavior for success and reinforce positive behavior so it continues to happen in the future. Our job as behavior analysts is to promote positive behavior, and we can do that by setting up our children for success and reinforcing the behavior after it occurs. So after identifying the most crucial communication skill that you would like to work on with your child, we will develop an intervention to both teach the new skill and reinforce the new skill. There is one main intervention that we are going to use called incidental teaching. Incidental teaching is a natural teaching strategy and is characterized by being child-led. In incidental teaching, we will incorporate the following strategies: environmental arrangement, prompting, and reinforcement. You will discuss this intervention with your BCBAD in order to plan and implement an individualized intervention that is best for your child. So what exactly is incidental teaching? Incidental teaching is an evidence-based naturalistic teaching intervention. So I want you to imagine how we naturally teach our children as they grow up. For example, if you see your child playing with a kitchen set and begin to play with your child using various items, you might start to do imaginary play with the items, making sounds and doing actions with them. Your child might then to imitate what you are doing. And then you reinforce them by saying, "That's right, the cake does go into the oven." You might also describe what you are doing. "I am baking muffins using this pan. The oven needs to turn on." Then you might hand the child a freshly baked muffin and pretend to eat one yourself. This type of teaching embeds learning into play to keep the child engaged and motivated. It is characterized by following the child's lead and capitalizing on learning opportunities that happen naturally throughout the day. So how might you follow the child's lead? The first is to identify a good time to join your child and embed communication opportunities. By following the child's lead, you are capitalizing on your child's motivation and keeping them engaged. This is important because it is very difficult to teach a child if they are not interested in what is being learned. So that you might get on your child's level, you can label their actions, you can imitate the play they are doing, and you can also praise your child approximately every 20 to 30 seconds. We want to keep in mind that we want your child to remain engaged. If we begin to place any sort of demands or request on the child, they may begin to lose interest. As adults, we tend to play by placing demands, such as, don't put the car in the tunnel, that's for trains, or what color is this, or do you want to play with this? Even simple questions can serve as demands for children with autism. So when you are playing with them, be careful and be mindful of not placing any demands. Now that we briefly reviewed the main interventions, we will discuss some tips for encouraging and reinforcing behavior. So incidental teaching uses environmental arrangement to capitalize on everyday communication opportunities. Our environment involves the surroundings and/or settings in which the behaviors occur. It could be the place, the objects that we use, or the people we're interacting with. Environmental arrangement is a crucial component to a natural-based intervention because it focuses on following your child's lead and providing the most natural reinforcement as possible. Environmental arrangement involves purposely planning and arranging the placement of objects in a room in order to increase desired behaviors and decrease the likelihood of undesired behaviors. Ways to arrange the environment include enticing play, sabotaging a favorite toy, sabotaging a favorite activity, or interrupting a routine. Enticing play means that you begin playing with a toy or game inside of your child. For example, you could play with your child's favorite toy spinner while he or she is in the room. Sabotaging a favorite toy or activity includes putting your child's favorite item in sight but out of reach. You could also remove batteries from the item, or you could also give them part of the item but not all of them. For example, if your child is putting together a puzzle, you might only give them one piece at a time so that they can continue to request the pieces to the puzzle. The last example, interrupting a routine, could happen, for example, if a child has mastered a routine. Take the example of washing hands. If your child has mastered washing hands, you can interrupt the steps by placing the soap pump out of reach so that they have to request it to complete the activity. So the environmental arrangement happens in the antecedent condition. But what happens if your child doesn't engage in the behavior at all? If your child does not engage in the behavior, we must teach the behavior, and this is where prompting comes in place. A prompt happens in between the antecedent and the behavior itself. It is a hint or cue added to the environment to make it more likely that the learner will respond correctly. So there are a number of prompts that you can use in incidental teaching. The 3 prompts we're going to use are time delay, model, and man model. And we are going to go into detail on each of these prompts. So what does time delay look like? Time delay is simply adding a little bit of time in between the antecedent and when you prompt the behavior. So consider we are setting up a fun activity such as swinging. As we are swinging our child, we may let the swing come to a stop. We then may wait with hands up as if to push the swing and with an expectant look on our face. If our child, in this case John, says push me, you can start pushing the swing really high and praise. Please note here that there is no vocal demands. Mom doesn't say anything during this time delay. She simply waits and has an expectant look on her face. So let's take a look at what time delay might look like. Good. Incidental teaching, example of the time delay prompt. Goat, cow, pig, horse, one horse, yes, sheep. So as you notice there, the therapist on the right is working with the child on the left, and she is labeling all of the animals as she hands them to the child. She then pauses in the middle and has an expectant look on her face. And with that slight delay, the child then uses the appropriate word to request the item. So there are situations where children may need a model to get the behavior started. Modeling positive behavior can go a long way for young learners. So in this case, John's mother may pause the swing and then model the language she wants John to use by saying, push me. Note she's still using the time delay prompt. She might wait 3 seconds with her hands up to push, but if after 3 seconds John doesn't say anything, she gives him a little extra hint by saying, push me. If John says, push me, Mom then pushes the swing really high and praises. So let's take a look at the modeling prompt. Incidental teaching, example of a model. Go ahead. Sheep.
Oh.
Horse.
Wow.
Cow. Pig. Goat.
Goat.
Goat. One goat. Yes, one goat. So there you can see the therapist on the right was working with the child on the left. She's providing her lots of examples of what she is looking for, and then she pauses briefly after the child reaches for it and provides an example of the language that she wants the child to use. So one modification of the modeling prompt is called partial modeling. Partial modeling is just like the modeling prompt, but you may only provide part of the model or the prompt. So in this example, Mom does the same thing. She lets the swing come to a stop, she waits with her hands up as to push, and she has an expectant look at her face. After 3 seconds, Mom models the language she wants John to use, but instead of saying, push me, she says, P. If John then says, push me, Mom will swing the swing really high and praise. So here's an example of the partial model prompt. Incidental teaching, example of a partial model. Horse.
Yay.
Goat.
Cow.
Cow. One cow. Great work. So there you can see the therapist said "k" for cow instead of modeling the entire word. So the last one is called a manned model. A manned is just a word we used for request. So in this situation, Mom lets the swing come to a stop. She waits with her hands up as if to push and has an expectant look on her face. This time they've been practicing quite a bit, And so Mom has been able to get John to say push me a number of times. She then uses the man modeling prompt, what do you want, which is a more naturalistic type of prompt. If after no response, Mom will then provide the model push me. So if John says push me, the mom will swing the swing really high and praise. So try to remember to wait the 3 seconds to allow the child to respond. So here's an example of the man model prompt. Instead, I'll teach an example of a man model. Horse. Sheep. Pig.
Yay!
What do you want?
Cow.
One cow. Great work. Here's goat. So you may be wondering, how do I determine the most effective prompts to use? In order to determine which prompts will be most effective for your child and the skill you are teaching, you must first determine what cues your child will need to respond to naturally. Then you will think about what your child does not know how to do. Remember that prompts should always be fated to the naturally occurring cue. During your first meeting with your BCBA, they will help you to decide which prompts to use. So make sure to bring your notes or a video example so they can get to know your child. So prompting can help us teach or cue our child. But what we do after the behavior or the consequence is very important. We want to be sure to reinforce the appropriate behavior so our child will continue to use the behavior in the future. Sometimes reinforcement is confused with a reward, such as stickers or candy. Candy can certainly be a reinforcer, but each child has different preferences. It could also be that many things are reinforcing for the child, or they may only have a few select items. It is important to notice what our children attend to and what they like to do, so that when we do reinforce a behavior, it is effective. So you will be incorporating reinforcement in all of the interventions that you choose. Reinforcement is any consequence, remember, good or bad, that follows a behavior. And the important part is that that behavior increases in the future, and that reinforcement makes that behavior more likely to occur in the future. So some tips on prompting and reinforcement. First, focus on teaching only one skill to your child at a time. Especially if they are an early learner or new to communication, you want to focus on that one skill so that they can effectively master that skill before moving on to a next. Also, everybody has a bad day, and sometimes learners can backtrack. It is important to work with your BCBA to evaluate the intervention and to ensure that the intervention is effective. If they are backtracking and you have questions, we encourage you to ask your BCBA. Also, practice makes perfect. Practicing every day and taking data on the prompt levels you use to help your child learn the behavior is very important and will be invaluable to your BCBA when they are evaluating the program. And finally, you might be so focused on what prompts to use and how you should be teaching your child, but we encourage you to not forget the reinforcement. The reinforcement is the key part to what encourages the behavior to happen in the future. So now we're going to put all the concepts together, reinforcement, prompting, environmental arrangement, and discuss the steps of incidental teaching. The first step is to follow the child's lead. Again, incidental teaching is a naturalistic intervention and is child-led. We wait for some sort of behavioral indicator that the child wants access to the item, either by pointing, reaching, or they may actually partially request. This video is an example of how we set up the play so that it is child-led. You will note that the therapist on the left-hand side and the child on the right-hand side. The therapist is going to label the child's actions, sometimes imitate the actions, but is going to refrain from asking questions or placing any demands. This is a pairing video where we'll just be engaging in cooperative play, playing together. Wah. Oh, baby! You're okay, you're okay.
It's okay.
Oh, chicken in the attic.
No.
Knock, 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 knock. Who's there? It's a cupcake. So one thing you'll notice is that if the child rejects something, the therapist casually puts it aside. And then she has a basket full of items that she can add to the play. We want to continue to add items to the play to keep the child's interest, and also so that we don't get in a situation where the child is wanting something we have and we are asking them to share, because that would be considered a demand. So then we can arrange the environment to bring out the communication response. We can either physically block or arrange the environment by placing items in sight but out of reach, using your body to block access to the item, storing toys in a sealed clear container, as was the example in the previous video, or giving children only part of the task, one piece at a time, sabotaging the activity. We then want to wait 3 seconds for the learner to request. You can try to maintain eye contact, but you should definitely have that expectant look on your face. And it is always important to give some delay or that time delay before we provide any sort of cue for our child. We want to make sure that your child doesn't not get used to having somebody else speak for them, but rather that they can communicate their wants and their needs. If your child makes a request without assistance, awesome. Definitely give them access, and we encourage you to give them access to the item for at least 20 seconds. If there is no request, it's time to teach. And this is where our prompts come in. So with your BCBA, you will identify what prompt to use at this point. And you can provide that prompt to cue your child on what you want them to say. So just a reminder, you can model the target response, or you can provide a man model by saying, "What do you want?" or say you want candy. And then if a request is made with the target behavior after the first prompt, awesome, give the child access for at least 20 seconds and record the prompt level that you had to use. If there is no request, give them another 3 seconds and then provide us another prompt. If after that second hint, there is no request made or no target communication, go ahead and just model what you wanted them to say for a final time and still give them access to the item. Something to note, if they do use the target response, that is fantastic. If they use it at least twice, then we'll start talking about expanding the learner's request and increasing one level above where they're currently performing. So here's a quick review of the steps in incidental teaching. Your BCBA will go over the procedure and make an individual plan for your child. They will then help you work with your child to troubleshoot and to help you implement the intervention effectively. So now you are ready to meet with your BCBAD. Remember to identify up to 3 skills you'd like to target with your child. Please take notes on how they perform their skills, and we highly encourage you to take a video so that your BCBAD can get to know your child. We look forward to working with you, and we look forward to our meeting with you. These are just a couple of references that we used when creating these materials.